culture in Davos. Really delighted to be joined by Robin Niblett. He's the director of Chatham House. I'd like to speak a little bit about Europe, which actually has been off the agenda for many here at Davos. I interviewed Tony Blair, who said he thought there was a risk, in fact, that in the UK we were getting a bit numbed to the issue ahead of the referendum. Would you say that's the case?
I think the British public have been numbed, and maybe the rest of the world, because we've been in what one might call a phony war. A period where no one quite knows what we're negotiating about. The negotiation is not completed. It's got another couple of months to go. So everyone's kind of having loose opinions, I'd say, about it, because they know it doesn't really matter at the moment what they think. When the negotiation is completed, that's when the sensible negotiation is meant to start. My worry is the negotiation may not be, the discussion after the negotiation may not be so sensible. You remember the UK just voted in a leader of the main opposition Labour Party, who was brought in as a kind of extra to run the vote, who no one thought would be voted. There were three mainstream candidates. The Labour Party activists picked this outsider, Jeremy Corbyn, to win. So I'd say the British public are very unpredictable. However good a deal David Cameron and George Osborne can strike, the risk is the British public may just decide, you know what, Europe looks like a strange place in any case. It's not the Europe, the safety option, the remain option that the British politicians are saying. It could end up feeling like, you know, we'll take our chances. And however logical or illogical it may seem to the politicians, we're in a kind of Trump-like mode in Britain and in Europe in general. And this is the danger of doing a referendum now. This is not like doing a referendum even 1 or 2 years ago.
I spoke to Moises Naim, who said that actually what he'd noticed was that there is ideological necrophilia, the return of bad ideas again and again and again, and that's the return of populism, the return of nationalism. None of these are particularly helpful ideas, yet they continue to come back. Why is that?
Maybe it's too far to say that countries are like people, but there is an aspect of society being an agglomeration of individuals that can have a kind of human character to it. The last time populism really emerged in Europe, at least, was on the tail end of an appalling recession in the 1920s, 30s, combined with some real resentments left over after the First World War. Here we are emerging from a pretty tough recession. Certainly for some of the countries of Europe, it's been brutal. Greece, 25% loss of GDP. Spain, unemployment at youth levels of 50%. I mean, it's been, although Germany's okay, maybe Sweden's okay, for a lot of them it's devastating. And so it's not, I think, surprising that the kind of populist mood that so characterized Europe in those difficult years after 1930s would reemerge. Not least because there's a sense the governments are not going to be able to take Europe back to that post-Second World War, we're at the top of the globalization chain, which fed the welfare systems around which political legitimacy of most political parties in Europe is built. Social welfare systems that define Europe's politics are starting to be taken apart because the governments can't afford them anymore because they're being competed by China or by Mexico or Indonesia. And so people are uncertain. They don't trust their political parties anymore to give them the answers they want. They go populist. I just don't think it's surprising.
The other thing that Blair said to me was that if you have to make a choice in a time when India is growing 1 billion people, China, the Chinese economy, every time the stock market falls, we all catch a cold. Is that the time to be choosing to leave the largest political union, the largest economic union, which is just on your doorstep?
Look, I think that the debate already is changing inside the UK. When David Cameron launched the idea of the referendum a couple of years ago, it was all about Europe is the free market that's going to help the UK go global. And it's not been. It's been holding Britain back. Britain is going to negotiate a reformed EU. And the reformed EU is one that's going to let Britain be able to take advantage of markets in China, India, be more competitive internally. It was a very economic argument. Just before Christmas, when he sent his letter into Donald Tusk with the final negotiating mandate, he gave a speech at Chatham House. And his kind of Chatham House speech, in the first 2 pages, the word security emerged 11 times. So here we've gone from sort of Europe as this economic engine that's not firing on all cylinders, and we, Britain, are going to get it into the right track and bring it closer to the people. to one that's perhaps necessary for Britain's economic and political security. So I think you're right. I think at a time when the world looks unpredictable and no one knows where America's going to go in terms of its political leadership, terrorist attacks, migration from outside the European Union, perhaps more of a risk than inside the European Union, which is what most Brits have been worried about. I think the security agenda, in my opinion, is probably what's going to win out and keep Britain in. It won't be actually the economic agenda.
Thank you very much for stopping by the Hub Culture Pavilion. I'd like to speak about this all day. I'm Edie Lutt.